Go ahead.
Paul, it's very nice to see you. And I didn't hear you cough once. So I know that you are in good state of health. It was throughout this Dhamma talk, I've been reflecting on the statement you made right at the very beginning, which says that you said that if you made a wish to be reborn as in the human realm, it's almost like an admission of defeat. I think that if after multiple rebirths, you can actually come into the human realm and renounce and be in robes, then I think perhaps that is what you said is correct. I think the challenge to someone who is in robes, who have come to the human realm in robes, would be to achieve final attainment of Nibbana. But I think that for the rest of us, lay persons, I just wonder how many more rebirths we need, especially back to the human realm, before we can actually reach the stage of renunciation. So that was something I was constantly reflecting on as you were talking today about our commitment to think about Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, because I've come to this talk now, this evening, after 3 full days of a convention that I was attending. So I think as a layperson, the demands on our time, etc., are enormous. So unless something has got into our consciousness to think about the goodness, the good characteristics of human behavior, etc., so that it's almost like an unconscious response to whatever comes about. It is very difficult for us to be reflecting on the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, except perhaps when we are in deep meditation. So I just wondered whether Paul would just comment on that. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the challenges of the lay life, and like you say, if you've got to the point where you're like me, a monk in a monastery, perhaps it is a more suitable lifestyle for really committing towards Nibbana and the practice. But nevertheless, whether you're a monk or a lay person, we all have this problem that we keep finding good excuses not to let go of mental defilements and to hold on to them. And so sometimes we need to be reminded that, we should just give up to the Dhamma, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, whether you're a lay person with lots of responsibilities and a complicated, full schedule, full lifestyle. Okay, so be it. But you still need to be reminded, I think, to commit to Nibbana, because that will lead your mind in the right direction as you go through your lay life, meeting all these commitments, going through the complicated relationships and work and family and all the things you have to do. You need some guidance. So coming back to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, coming back to Nibbana and what that means to you, letting go, we need to keep doing that. And if just becoming mindful of the breath, a few in-breaths and out-breaths in the middle of your 3-day convention, maybe, you take a few moments just to breathe in, breathe out, let go. I think that could be quite useful for you. Because, of course, life is bound up with all kinds of more mundane activities. We need to eat, we need to earn a living, we need to do all the things we need to do. But we also have the challenge of how to bring up mindfulness in the midst of all that. And so even in the middle of a 3-day convention, I've done one Buddhist convention of 3 days in my whole life. that was enough, never again. And, you know, that's what I did in the middle of that convention. You know, I listened to the speakers. I didn't have to speak much myself, but I listened, and from moment to moment, I'll just go back to the breath and then listen again and breath. And, you know, you follow through the routine of the day, the schedule, but you do your best to maintain mindfulness. And, you know, even if you, at the end of your convention, you're feeling tired, fed up, and say, I never want to do another convention again. Well, that can be some benefit to you. You get some wisdom. It's like you're reducing your attachment to the conditions for rebirth, and you're shortening your time in samsara a bit, because you're getting, you know, some insight into the suffering of conventions and human beings who have to go through conventions. Maybe, you know, maybe actually at the end of your convention, you might even become enlightened.
Right. So thank you, Brother ST. I hope that answers your question. Can I next invite Richard Clark? Richard, if you can hear me, can you unmute yourself, please? Great, thanks. Go ahead.
Dear Lungpa, I actually wrote this, and Peter happily elected me to present, but here we go. Unlike our more fortunate Asian neighbours, there's next to no thread of the Buddhist tradition here in Australia. Like your experience, you reported about the UK, our local religion is more to do with football and other sports. Probably the predominant religion. Vineyards, I know Bodhivana is on you know, an old former vineyard, but vineyards seem more important than vineyard. Where is this heading? Do you see this ever changing? And if so, how? So,
well, of course, for each individual, things can change very quickly and dramatically in a good way if we become, you know, gain faith in the Buddha and his teachings. You know, your life can go up and progress. And when you practice more, you tend to through osmosis or just through connections, you gradually meet with other like-minded people, maybe. And so even in what you might call non-Buddhist countries, you know, there are plenty of good people around. There's plenty of people around who are interested even in the Buddhist teachings, but they may be at first not obvious. But the more you practice, the more you tend to meet them. But yeah, perhaps there'll always be, for a long time to come, all kinds of people in the world with problems and conflicts, and people who don't seem to be getting out of samsara at all, of course. But then there'll also be those people who are getting out of samsara, and I think they're still around today, and they'll be continuing in the world for a while to come. And that's, you know, that offers us some hope. Sometimes it's good to go to a place where there's a lot of Buddhists. So like you go to a country like Thailand, where I lived for 18 years, you know, you get a lot of boost to your practice because you meet teachers and fellow practitioners. As I said, nowadays, wherever you live in the world, like even now on this very Zoom session, you know, people join from all over the world, and you can meet Buddhists at least online and sometimes in person. But just manage your expectations. You know, we're not expecting the whole world to suddenly become Buddhist or peaceful or wise. You know, it'd be nice if they could, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. But one individual can become wiser through the practice, can become more peaceful, can experience more contentment and happiness. That certainly can happen. And then that one individual can also maybe help others. You help others the best you can, those around you. So in my life, my experience is, you know, the more you practice, the more you yourself incline towards the goodness of the mind, the good qualities of the mind, the more effort you put into bringing them up, the more that brings you to meet with the same goodness in other people, whether they're formally declared Buddhists or not Buddhists. Well, that's a different question. But the more you notice the good in yourself and aspire to that, the more you see that in other people as well, and you realize there's actually a lot of good in the world. It's just, it doesn't make the news, and it's often overlooked and underestimated, but it's there. And you have to just don't give up, keep practicing, and you'll find more good in yourself, more good in others. It will grow.
Thank you, Richard, for your question. Next, can I please call upon Priyanta? Priyanta from Melbourne. Can you hear me? If you can you unmute? Yes.
Okay. My question is about breath meditation. Is it possible to incorporate Buddha into breath meditation together with the breath, mindfulness of the breath? And how do we do that, if it is possible?
Simple answer is yes, it is. Ajahn Chah and other teachers also have taught Buddha as a meditation object that you can do in conjunction with the breathing. So with the in-breath, you recite Put, the first syllable. With the out-breath, you recite Do. It's a very common pattern. But you have to work out your own rhythm, because everyone's breath is slightly faster or slower. So some people do recite Buddha on the in-breath, Buddha on the out-breath. But you could try just Bud on the in-breath, To on the out-breath. Bud, To, Bud, To. Particularly, you need to have some faith in the Buddha. So it's for somebody who has a certain quality of faith in their character. And a lot of Westerners, not brought up Buddhists, they find using Buddha difficult. But if you've recited Buddha and found that your mind is content to keep bringing it up and putting mindfulness on Buddha, then use it. And it's a very useful object. You can just recite Buddha without the breath as well, of course, whether you're walking or sitting or even doing different activities. So monks, they love to recite Buddha when they're sewing, or they're chopping wood, or they're crocheting, or the things that these different crafts and simple activities we do, sweeping leaves, we can recite Buddha. You can try that as well. So sometimes you're doing it with the breath, but to do it with the breath, you probably have to be sitting still, just doing your breath meditation, but reciting Buddha at the same time. As I said, either Buddha or Buddha, depending. But also you can experiment with using Buddha as just a mental recitation as you're moving around doing different activities. That's also useful. And you can turn to the breath but some people find the breath difficult to be with for whatever reason. So you can experiment turning to Buddha. So say you're worried about something, you just recite Buddha for a few moments. Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. And it brings up the recollection of Buddha, whatever Buddha means to you. You recite Buddha, Buddha, and already you maybe feel a little more calm in the midst of your stress, your worry, or you're panicking, Buddha, Buddha. Or somebody was talking about fear today. They have fear, particularly with exams and things. Recite Buddha just to calm the mind before the activity or the thing you have to engage with that is bringing up fear. You recite Buddha. And I've known many, many Buddhists who have used Buddha to help them get through moments of panic, fear, nervousness, worry, or even anger. You can use it. If you're mindful enough just to remember Buddha when you're getting angry or you're already angry, But then you say, this is not good, I'm angry, and you start reciting Buddho, Buddho, Buddho to put your mind somewhere else away from whatever it is that's making you angry, and you stop thinking about it and you go to Buddho. That can work as well. So you can really experiment with this, but start with the breath, yes, and in breath, out breath, Buddho, either Buddho or Buddho, Buddho. Try it.
Thank you, Priyanta. Paul, there are a few questions here that are typed, written. Let me read it out. The first question is, what are the causes for mindfulness? Paul, this person's questions, what are the causes for mindfulness?
The causes.
That's right, CAUSES.
Oh, okay. Yep. Well, there's many. Obviously, what we talk about all the time, we practice mindfulness in a formal way when we do some meditation, sitting or walking meditation. So you are given or suggested a meditation object, such as the breathing or Buddho, as we were just mentioning, and you take a period of time to practice cultivating mindfulness directed to that object. So knowing Buddho by reciting it over and over again and letting go of everything else. You become mindful using Buddho or of Buddho, or the breath. You become mindful of the in and out breath, the feeling of the in and out breath. And the more you pay attention to that, the more mindful you become. But another cause can be listening to Dhamma like this. Hearing the Dhamma makes you mindful. It reminds you to be mindful. It reminds you of the truth. It reminds you of some of the Buddhist teachings. And if they make sense to you, then you suddenly become more mindful, doesn't it? It cuts through the trivia of the mind or the distractions of the mind or strong emotions that are coming out. If you hear the Dhamma, at the right moment you hear the Dhamma, whether it's just a friend telling you something or reminding you something, or it's a formal Dhamma talk, maybe you're angry and someone reminds you just to calm down, let it go, forgive the person, accept what's happened. Maybe just a few words of Dhamma makes you mindful and helps you cut through something that's really causing you suffering. Danger makes you mindful. So danger can be brought up in the sense, again, listening to the Dhamma can remind you of the dangers of not being mindful. But that could be the dangers of attachment, craving and attachment in the formal sense. When we hear a Dhamma talk, explanation of how craving and attachment causes suffering, so then we should be mindful so we can let go of craving and attachment. Maybe hear an explanation. And because we see the need to be mindful, because there's a danger of not being mindful and there's suffering that can come when we're not mindful, then we become more mindful and put more effort into it. But it also can be in a very ordinary, natural way. So you're about to cross the road and someone might say, be careful, be mindful, because there's cars. It could be something very simple like that. Or you're walking through the forest and you meet a tiger snake. And you say, oh, I better be mindful because this guy can bite me and cause me trouble. So many situations can make us mindful because of danger, or there's a need to pay attention. And that's often why people, they do certain activities because they enjoy the becoming more mindful, like rock climbing, where you have to really concentrate, or sports and games are making us more mindful. In order to be good at a sport, you have to pay attention, put effort in, be mindful of what you're doing. So on a low level, you might say, or a mundane level, these kind of ordinary situations can make us mindful as well. But the most important thing is being mindful of Dhamma. So that's of the path of practice, sila, samadhi, panya. So it depends on the situation, what's needed. So just seeing a monk can make you mindful, can't it? Because generally when people come in contact with monks, they become a little bit better behaved, they're more mindful, so they speak better and they behave better, they argue less and they're less greedy. And that's one of the roles of a monk. I mean, we have to practice as well, of course. I'm not saying we don't, but when you live in or stay in a monastery or go on a retreat in a monastery, you go to the monastery and you see all this nice food at mealtime and your mind is going, oh, I'd like to have a lot of these things, but then you see a monk and you think, oh, but I better be modest and just take a small amount because I can't be greedy. So you see a monk and it makes you more mindful, more careful of what you're thinking, what you're doing. Or if you have a Buddha statue at home, that can make you mindful, can't it? You see the Buddha statue, you're about to get angry with your family member and have an argument, but you see the Buddha statue and think, oh, never mind, let it go. I'm not going to shout or argue with them because you see the Buddha. There are many situations people have told me that they've been arguing with someone, but then they see the Buddha statue or the picture of Buddha and a sense of shame and the realization, perhaps I'm indulging my anger here, I should stop. It comes up because they see something that reminds them of the Dhamma. They keep the precepts or they become more mindful in that situation. There's so many things that can make us mindful. But anything that inclines you, brings you to the Dhamma, so hearing talks, seeing monks, or being around other mindful people. The Buddha said this is one of the most beneficial things for your practice, is to be with other people who are mindful. So this is why people go and stay with teachers like Ajahn Chah, because Ajahn Chah was super mindful. If Ajahn Chah is super mindful, when you're with someone like that, you become mindful. It's contagious in a good way. It's addictive in a good way. It's nice to be mindful and around people who are mindful. Life goes better. Things, you have less stress, less suffering. So it becomes something you want to do. So stay around people who are mindful. It's much more challenging being around people who are not mindful. So people who have no precepts and no mindfulness, you have to work hard when you're with them, because it's like they're stressing out themselves, and maybe they pass their stress on to you and they give you trouble as well. And you have to work harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more challenging. So stay around people who are mindful, that will help you.
Sadhu Lampa. I have a final question here. Dear Lampa, I would like to ask, when one ordains as a monk, how does his relationship with his parents, his siblings change? Sadhu.
It's kind of the opposite of marriage. Like marriage, you have the honeymoon period when it's all good, it's all lovey-dovey, everyone's happy, and then gradually things go downhill from there. It's the opposite. The first period is the hard part, because nobody understands why you're doing it and what you're doing, and then nobody agrees with you, and everyone is against it, and they try and talk you out of it, and sometimes they cry or they argue, or all kinds of problems in the beginning. But if you stick to it and you practice, you're only doing good things, aren't you? You're only keeping precepts, meditating, becoming wiser, more compassionate over time. So over time, gradually people appreciate you more, and they get to the point where instead of arguing with you and trying to get you to disrobe, they start to support you, and they give their anumodana, and they may even like it and think this is a good thing. You may be able even to get them a good rebirth in heaven if you really try hard enough.
Sadhu Lampa. That's all the questions that we have for this evening, Lampa.
Okay, well, very nice to talk to you all, and we can end it there tonight.